I clicked the link to join the channel here over at subscribe. So thanks to people over at Buy Me a Coffee. So it's something like 10% of the people on Twitter are doing 90% of the tweets. And then you look at that and you go, oh, yeah, there's people who are spending way, way too much time on Twitter. They're terminally involved in this culture war where you look at it and you're like, so you spent 2 hours a day on Twitter? Yeah, that's right. I was owning the Chads, the Hugo Boss Chads. I was dunking on them, and then I blocked them, and I got like a lot of likes on my tweet, and I got a little dopamine boost. And I'm sitting here, I'm drinking wine, probably box wine, and I'm on my laptop with my cats, and I dunked on Chads for 2 hours, and then I masturbated furiously in the bathtub using running water. Okay, I mean that may not be the most productive use of your time. Have you considered gardening, or maybe a little exercise? You know, I'm not saying you're a little chubby, but you're a little chubby. Maybe a little exercise, gardening, reading, really anything. I mean, you're really not getting anything on dunking on the Chads on Twitter. It's like that doesn't actually bring you any value other than the little dopamine boosts. But you know, a few years you're gonna look back and they go like, oh, that was a complete waste of 5 years of Twitter time. I built up a following, but it was like that was 5 wasted years. I could have had a sweet home garden in that time period. There's a lot of people on Twitter like that. Like honestly, it's really, really sad. Anyway, so Gina Carano is apparently the greatest evil known to man, says the pronoun political commissar. Dear Lord. Beep, boop. That's she didn't know that would set off the mentally ill crowd. So first thing you got to understand is this modern left wing is actually brutally violent, sociopathic, mentally ill Bolsheviks. And if you read their tweets, eventually you're going to understand that they are mentally ill, but the mainstream media is taking them seriously. It's like, gee, why does mainstream media take the Jussie Smollett, the Bubba Wallace type of things so seriously? You look into those, you go, 99% of those are hoaxes. It's the guy painting the crooked cross on his truck to get insurance money, but the neighbor's high definition video camera picks it up. You're like, but the media takes them seriously, but when they issue on the first page, and then when they issue the retractions, it's buried, so it doesn't get the same amount of impressions. But the media takes every new accusation of one of these hoaxes, which are almost always hoaxes, seriously. You look at the media like, the media is just fomenting this discord. They know not to take this seriously, or at least wait for further facts to develop, but they don't. They just constantly are pouring oxygen into this engine to run it at redline, and the oil's pouring out and there's no water, and the media is got its foot to the floorboard. And like, you're doing this and you're lying. Like, the stuff, the probability is that this stuff are hoaxes, and you're doing it anyway. It's like the media is the bad guys. The media is not the media. It's like, yeah, the media is not the media. Anyway, the media is taking all this. The media pushes mentally ill people because they get on Twitter. All you need is a $50 smartphone and a Wi-Fi plan or some minutes to push your stuff out there. And it's like there's a lot of deeply disturbed, like generationally disturbed people on Twitter, and the mainstream media is pushing that. The mainstream social media has been pushing that. And there's really no course correction for that, because it's not even like you don't need to censor them. It's that the right of center voices have been censored. Like, all you'd need to do to even the playing field is if you had constitutionally protected free speech across social media platforms. If you couldn't get fired or debanked or denied services because of opinions online, it's like then you'd start having the adults come back in the building, and you would have like I don't know what's when they lower the atomic the pile. They have these carbon rods that go into the uranium pile to absorb neutrons and whatnot. It slows the reaction down. It's like that would be the function of the right wing, to slow this reaction down from going critical. But all those people got, until Elon bought Twitter, they all got censored. But I mean, like, the rest of social media is completely this far left bizarro echo chamber where, like, the media and the social media is all accelerating. They're all removing the carbon absorption rods from the pile to make things just go as critical as fast as possible. And you realize, oh, their goal all along is to destroy the nation and the West. By the West, I mean all Western nations. It's like, yeah, the media is the one who is really doing this. Anyway, eventually, if you read enough of their tweets, you'll understand you're dealing with seriously mentally ill people here. And a lot of people have just been so delusional for so long that it's like when people say, oh, you need a war because like all this stuff is first world problems that immediately disappear, where you're gardening and it's not for pleasure, you're gardening to survive. It's like, well, suddenly all the pronoun stuff is going to go out the window. You're just like, all this stuff goes out the window when the power's off and you decide like, oh, these potatoes are the difference between life and death. So this isn't the peace and love 1969 left wing. That was always a Trojan horse to bring in globalist control. Now they're fully mask off. These are the people who want to put you in re-education camps if you use the biologically correct pronouns. They want open borders, taxpayer-funded everything, and also the taxpayers to send the money around the world and not to take care of the American homeless tent cities. It's not because they care or don't care. They want to accelerate the destruction to critical mass to destroy the cities. So they go, oh, well, our far-left policies destroyed the cities. Now we need to go further far left to save them through communism. It's like, but you did this on purpose. Your far-left policies of socialism, feminism, liberalism over the past 70 years caused all this. It was only to usher in communism. You're like, but communism's been tried for the past 110 years. It's never worked, and you think it's going to work now. Instead of just stop sending money overseas and taking care of maybe taking care of those American tent cities, the left wing wants American tent cities. And they want to do all this stuff, send money overseas and pay for all this open borders, health at every size with a shrinking tax base. And if we say, oh, hey, maybe we just need to separate, well, they threaten violence because they don't want their tax base to we're just going to take a few states for law and order. And then they look at that and like, oh, so the productive people who want law and order, who are 90% of the tax base, they want to form their own state. It's like, we can't let them go. It's like, that's where we are. That's where we're very close to coming to, as far as you can say on Google Tube. So nothing they say makes sense until you finally realize that most of them are mentally ill, useful idiots being manipulated by the same Bolsheviks from 1914. They're like a bad thing that keeps coming back in a garden. So this issue is compelled speech, which until very recently the left wing would have been against compelled speech, F the draft and live free or die from those Supreme Court cases, being manipulated to say things that are lies. But the left seems to shift in the wind like a rudderless shift until the recent health events over the past 3 years. They were also against compelled medical stuff. And then the laws that came, those laws that came from that last really, really big war 70-odd years ago, and then they were manipulated into fear by the globalist media and government. Then they changed their mind about all that. Compelled speech and compelled health decisions, that those laws that came out of the Treaty of the Hague or something, out of 1945-ish. So were they ever against these things? I mean, did they ever really have any principles, or were they always just useful idiots who would do whatever their puppet masters, pulled the strings of Waldo to make them dance? I would have assumed that using pressure to compel someone to speak words that are against their values, I would have assumed that everyone would be against compelled speech. Not so much. Unless there's a powerful reason to compel it, perhaps like forcing a draft to provide for the common defense of the homeland. All right, fair enough. But to force speech to not hurt someone's feelings is not a compelling interest. It seems like slavery, mental slavery at first, but it also seems like a dangerous, slippery slope. Like if you don't let your child be transitioned by their blue-haired teacher, then the state needs to remove the child and put them in blue-haired foster care where they're guaranteed to get abused to get them away from the bigoted parents who don't want their kids sterilized by the states. You think it's crazy that it's all actually happening. But it is all actually happening. And when I say America, I mean the West in general, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, Europe, or at least Western Europe, and America. But if nobody stops it, then it will only get worse. I mean, Canada has deletes the mentally ill and the homeless and the poor. That all actually happens. I mean, you'd think that would be a time for a Civil War event, but it's, bread and circuses, soy slop, sports ball, and prawn are pretty easy distractions. I mean, there's a lot more to say on that, but probably not for YouTube. I mean, it's like all this stuff is all actually happening. It's, is it past time for redress of grievance? Yeah, I mean, if you're deleting the poor and the mentally ill or the addicted instead of treating them and like fixing your society so that you don't have poor, mentally ill, or people addicted to chemicals, you're just deleting them, departing them from this mortal coil as they're doing in Canada. It's like, that's a society that needs a reset and not a Schwab type of reset. It needs to go in a different direction. because you're killing the homeless. That's pretty. It's pretty mad. That's the dystopian future, except it's all actually happening today in Canada. There's a lot of that's how it happens. It's heading for the United States. Oh, it never come here. Well, hey, friend, do you think there'd be kids dancing around on stage for men throwing dollar bills? Do you think that would come to America if I said that 40 years ago? Oh, yeah, any horror you can imagine is going to come to America because see what they're doing right now. What do you think they're going to be doing in 10 years, 20 years, 40 years? Anything they want because nobody's stopping them. Anyway, yeah, all this stuff is getting worse, and like the only person that's going to stop it is the person you see in the mirror. So the left wing believes in compelled speech. They believe that the state and government schools know better than you on how to raise your children. They're Bolsheviks, commies, globalists, different names throughout history, but it's the same bad ideas on how to enslave people. Keep in mind that these nut jobs are outraged that Gina isn't supporting their make-believe world of fake pronouns, and it is. It's just a fad. 20 years from now, it's going to be gone. Their anger is way out of proportion, precisely because the things they claim to sincerely believe are so absurdly ridiculous. They don't actually believe them. It's a house of cards that's built on sand, an emperor has no clothes type of thing, where if you point it out, you get such a disproportionate, violent response because they know, like deep down, they know all this stuff is an illusion. They go from the far left echo chamber of this nonsense where they identify as rebellious, furry poxwalks, otherkin, and call each other Star Child, Lord of the Kitten Universe. But then they get around us, the world of the mostly rational and sane, and we say, hey, we're not going to call you by a plural or by a zim or zer or something like that. In our world, you're a man or a woman, and we're going to use those correct genders, the precise and accurate genders for you, because if we believe that it's derived from sex, so there's only going to be two, because that's the nature of reality, or at the very least, it's the nature of our reality, and it appears that we have interests adverse to each other and irreconcilable differences in this regard. And when you say that, suddenly all the peace and love stuff goes out the window because we won't participate in their illusion, and they're overcome with a killing rage. All it takes to shatter their illusion, and if you think I'm kidding about that, go talk to them about it on Twitter. I'm not. Like, that's really how they see the world. If you shatter their illusion by using the precise and accurate pronoun, they literally think violence against you is acceptable. All they have to label you is, if they label you as Hugo Boss, then anything can be done against you. And there's no logical argument to be had. All they have to do is, and like they label like the Proud Boys as that, and you go, so what led you to believe that? Oh, it doesn't matter. They're just this, and we have to do violence against them. But you're going to lay any foundation before you spread this stochastic terrorism against these people who, as far as I can tell, peacefully assemble, and that's it? No. Violence against them is justified because we labeled them this thing. Oh, it just seems like you guys are the bad guys. No, it's like, yeah, they've been the bad guys all along. Anyway, all it takes to get them to respond to violence is just to shatter their illusion by being honest with them. The thing about Gina is she seems smart, and I don't know if she's naive or playing a chess game. I can't tell yet. I don't. The only reason I'd watch modern TV or movies or kind of stuff is just for reviews. There's nothing to watch for pleasure. No, like a Mando, Star Wars. You think all these Star Wars shows. Although I've seen some of them to do the reviews, but like none of them are worth watching, and there's nothing that's going to be worth watching in the future. Hollywood is over, and that's not a hyperbolic statement. You'll eventually come to that same conclusion yourself. So not everyone is online enough to really know how crazy these SJWs are. It's generations of mental illness because you got the hippy-dippy single mom flakes in the 60s and the 70s, and kids in the participation trophy generation. And then we were forcing artificially high self-esteem in the 80s and in the 90s. Then you have these soy flake girls and sensitive soy boys having kids who are far enough removed from the horrors of communism that they're just not being taught it, and they think they're going to do it differently this time. Everything in the globalist schools and the media is pushing this Hugo Boss as the greatest evil. That's the narrative now. And you go back and look at like movies from the 80s and 90s where it was all a joke. It was all treated very, very lightly, where it's like 40 years later, they're able to change a narrative completely. And it's through incremental brainwashing. You can get people to believe anything you want. I mean, you can get people to believe that the Proud Boys are like this dangerous group that deserves violence done against them. and you don't have to provide any evidence. It's just an in-group of left-wingers who are labeling an out-group, and there's no evidence required. It's like, oh, yes, we've labeled them, do violence against them. And nobody on the left raises their hand and says, wait, what's the evidence? What's your argument? What data do you have to support that we need to do violence against these people? Because I see that they're just peacefully assembled. They haven't done any violence, but you're labeling them as this group, and thus it's okay to do violence against them. It seems like you're the bad guys, and if you're on the left and you say that, you're just not going to be on the left for long because they're going to label you as the out group, like, oh, you're supporting them. I'm asking for like evidence and due process, and you guys are pushing a witch trial. And the left, I'm talking about this. There's a Mary Sue article that came out where that's literally what they're talking about. And like nowhere in the comment section did anyone ask for the concept of due process. They just go, oh, we've labeled this group, we can do violence against them. And you're like, you're looking at them. Specifically, it's this Proud Boy group, and you look at them, you're like, but they're a mixed group, and there's BLT, and there's different religions, there's different ethnicities in them. It's like that argument never comes up, and I mean, it's like you're dealing with the bomb throwing Bolsheviks of 100 years ago, where it's just that like these are witch trials, like the left wing was the bad guys the whole time. Everything is the left hand path, the inverted universe. Where right wing, and the further right you go, you're gonna have a peaceful, ordered society. It's like at this point we have irreconcilable differences. It's better to separate. I make these YouTube videos and I just kind of go off in a base direction. It's kind of hard to stick to the narrative. I hope this is okay for YouTube because it's 15 minutes, 16 minutes. I really don't want to remake it. Anyway, thanks everyone who supported on Subscribestar or on the Buy Me a Coffee app. I've got 2 supporters over there, Mr. Santa and Mr. Someone. Yeah, that's the name. Thanks for that support. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys all next episode.